Before he became a president, he was a farmer. Before he led an army, he was a surveyor. Before he united a nation, he doubted he could lead at all. George Washington wasn't born to be a king or a hero. But when destiny called, he answered. With quiet strength, unshakable will, and the humility that would define a revolution. This is the untold story of America's first president. Not just the face on the dollar bill, but the man behind the myth. George Washington was born on February 22, 1732, in Westmoreland County, Virginia, to a family of modest means in the colonial aristocracy. He was the oldest of 6 children from his father's second marriage. When George was just 11, his father died, cutting short any chance for a formal education in England. Instead, young George learned the ways of the world on Virginia's frontier. He became a skilled land surveyor by age 17, mapping wilderness and earning respect with his work ethic and courage. But even then, he carried a quiet ambition driven not by pride, but a deep sense of purpose. Washington's first taste of war came in the French and Indian War, a brutal conflict between Britain and France for control of North America. At just 22, he led troops into the Ohio Valley and made mistakes that cost lives. But he learned fast. His bravery under fire and survival against impossible odds made him a legend among colonists and a name whispered across Europe. Still, Washington was disillusioned by how the British treated colonial officers. He returned home not just older, but wiser, and quietly simmering with the desire for something more, something freer. As tensions grew between the British Crown and the colonies, Washington watched from his estate at Mount Vernon. He wasn't a fiery speaker like Patrick Henry or a prolific writer like Thomas Jefferson. He was a man of action. And when the call came in 1775, the Second Continental Congress chose him unanimously as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. He didn't celebrate. Instead, he wrote to his wife Martha, "I have used every endeavor in my power to avoid it." But once again, Washington stepped into history not because he wanted glory, but because he felt duty. The Revolutionary War was long, bitter, and often hopeless. Washington lost more battles than he won. His army froze, starved, and bled. But they didn't quit. In the darkest winter at Valley Forge, it was Washington's endurance, not his strategy, that held the revolution together. He walked among his men, shared their suffering, and never left their side. Then, on Christmas night, 1776, he crossed the icy Delaware River and struck the British at Trenton, a surprise attack that turned the tide. Victory would take 7 more grueling years, but in 1781, with help from France, Washington forced the British to surrender at Yorktown. The impossible had happened. A ragtag army had defeated the world's greatest empire. After the war, something extraordinary happened. George Washington resigned. He could have been king. The army would have followed him. The people might have begged for it. But Washington handed his sword to Congress and returned to Mount Vernon. When King George III heard the news, he reportedly said, "If he does that, he will be the greatest man in the world." And so, he became exactly that. In 1789, after much persuasion, Washington was unanimously elected as the first president of the United States. There were no rules, no roadmap, only ideals. And Washington set the tone with dignity, restraint, and foresight. He created a cabinet, respected the limits of power, and kept the fragile Union from tearing apart. He served 2 terms and then again walked away from power. His farewell address warned against political parties, foreign entanglements, and division. Warnings we still hear echoing today. George Washington died in 1799 at Mount Vernon, surrounded by the land he loved and the people he led. He was no flawless figure. He owned slaves, a fact that modern history reckons with. But even there, he stood apart, freeing his slaves in his will, the only founding father to do so. He was stoic, private, sometimes stern, but always steadfast. Not a man of many words, but one whose actions shaped a nation. George Washington taught us that true leadership isn't about holding power. It's about letting it go. He didn't chase greatness. He simply did what needed to be done with honor, humility, and heart. And maybe that's the lesson we still need today, in a world that celebrates noise. It's the quiet strength, the calm in the storm that forges real change. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Explore more powerful stories from history in our next video.